They miss you every single day. Let me be blunt with you. They think about your absence far more than you realize. But here's what most people don't understand. Their ego won't let them admit it. If you've been in that situation where someone walked away from you, pulled back, or just went silent, and you're sitting there wondering, do they even think about me? When do you undervalued? The answer is yes. They do, but you'll never hear it from them. And here's the kicker. While you're worried about being forgotten, they're dealing with something most people never talk about. That silence you're using, it's not just affecting them, it's transforming you into someone completely untouchable. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly what's happening in their mind during your silence, why their ego prevents them from reaching out, and most importantly, what's changing inside you that makes their return completely irrelevant. Because the real power was never about making them miss you. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need them to. This isn't about games or manipulation. This is about understanding the psychological collapse that happens when someone realizes what they lost, and why your peace matters more than their regret. Let's break it down. Now, before we go deeper into this, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about playing mind games or trying to manipulate someone into missing you. That's not what this is about. What I'm going to show you is the psychological reality of what happens when someone who undervalued you suddenly loses access to you. Not because you're trying to hurt them, not because you're trying to make them regret it, but because you chose peace over chasing validation from someone who couldn't see your worth. This works because it's based on human psychology, not tricks. When you stop making yourself available to someone who took you for granted, something shifts. And we're going to break down exactly what that shift is, and more importantly, what it does to you in the process. Here's the trap most people fall into. They go silent for a day, maybe two, and then panic. They start wondering if the other person even noticed. They check their phone obsessively. They look at the person's social media. And then, because the silence feels unbearable, they break it. They send a text. They reach out. They need to know if they're being thought about. And the moment they do that, they teach the other person something critical. Your attention is free. Your absence doesn't mean anything because you'll always come back. This is why most people's silence fails. They treat it like a tactic, something you do to get a reaction. But here's what you need to understand. Silence isn't a strategy you deploy. It's a boundary you enforce. It's what happens when you decide that your peace matters more than someone else's approval. Most men don't realize this until it's too late. They give their attention freely to people who never valued it, hoping that one day those people will wake up and appreciate them. But attention without boundaries just becomes background noise. And you become forgettable. So what actually happens when you stay silent, not as a tactic, but as a genuine boundary? Here's the process. Over the next 16 minutes, we're walking through exactly what happens during strategic silence. First, the ego protection phase they go through. Second, the internal struggle signs you need to recognize. Third, what happens when their facade starts cracking. Fourth, the transformation happening in you through this silence. And finally, why your peace becomes your ultimate power. Each stage reveals something most people never see. Stay with me. Stage 1 begins the moment your silence starts. And here's what happens. They notice immediately. The person who walked away from you, who pulled back, who acted like your presence didn't matter. They notice the second you stop reaching out. But here's the thing most people don't understand. Noticing isn't the same as admitting. Their ego kicks in first. It's a protection mechanism. They tell themselves a story. I'm the one who pulled away. So of course, they stopped reaching out. That's what I wanted. Or maybe, they're probably just busy. They'll reach out eventually. Or even, they're playing games. I see what they're doing. The ego needs to maintain control of the narrative. It needs to believe that your silence is their choice, not their consequence. It needs to frame your absence as something they caused intentionally, not something they lost access to. But underneath that story, they're aware. They see that you're not calling, that you're not texting, that you're not checking in like you used to, that you're not liking their posts or watching their stories, that your name doesn't appear in their notifications anymore. And that absence registers. It sits in the back of their mind, quiet but persistent. They might not reach out. They might not say anything. They might even convince themselves they don't care. But they feel it every day, in small moments. When something reminds them of you, when they reach for their phone out of habit and realize there's nothing from you, when they wonder what you're doing and have to stop themselves from checking. Here's what you need to understand. Most people who walk away from you or pull back do it because they think you'll always be there. They think your attention is a given. They believe that no matter how they treat you, you'll keep showing up, keep caring, keep being available. Your silence disrupts that assumption. And that disruption, that's the first crack in their ego. Because now they have to wonder, did I actually lose them? Or are they just waiting for me to come back? If you understand this, you're already ahead of most people who stay stuck, wondering if they're even being thought about. They are, but their pride won't let them show it. Not yet. But noticing your absence is just the surface. Here's where the real struggle begins. The power shift. See, when you were available, when you were the one reaching out, checking in, making effort, the power dynamic was clear. You needed them more than they needed you. Your attention flowed freely in their direction, and they controlled when and how to reciprocate. But the moment you stopped, the moment you went silent and stayed silent, that dynamic flipped completely. Here's why silence is so powerful. It forces the other person to confront what they've been avoiding. When you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your worth, stop trying to prove you matter, you create a vacuum. And that vacuum demands a response, not from them necessarily, but from reality itself. They start to wonder. They start to question, why aren't they reaching out? Did I hurt them more than I thought? Are they over it? Have they moved on? And the longer your silence continues, the more those questions amplify. Because silence doesn't argue. Silence doesn't defend itself. Silence just is. And that presence of absence becomes louder than anything you could say. This is the power shift. You're no longer the one seeking validation. You're no longer the one trying to maintain the connection. You've become the boundary. And boundaries, when they're real and enforced, shift the entire frame. Most people don't understand this. They think power comes from having the last word, from making someone chase them, from proving they were right. But real power is being so grounded in your peace that you don't need to prove anything. You don't need them to admit they miss you. You don't need them to apologize or come back. You're simply holding your boundary, and that alone changes everything. This is what strategic silence actually is. Not a game. Not manipulation. It's the natural consequence of choosing yourself over someone who didn't choose you. And that choice, that's what makes you untouchable. So while you've stepped back into your peace, what's happening on their side? Let me show you. You're 10 minutes in, and you're seeing what most people completely miss. What I'm about to show you next is what keeps them up at 2 a.m., the internal struggle they'll never admit out loud. Here's the reality. While they're maintaining that calm exterior, behind closed doors, there's chaos. They check your social media. Not obsessively. They're too proud for that. But casually. Scrolling through, seeing what you're posting, looking for signs that you're thinking about them. And when they don't see any, when your life seems to be moving forward without them, that hits differently. They tell themselves it's random. I was just scrolling and saw their post. But it's not random, it's intentional. They're looking for evidence that your silence is bothering you as much as their absence is bothering them. They need to know that they still matter to you. Because if they don't, if you've genuinely moved on, then they have to confront something painful. Maybe they were the one who needed you more than you needed them. Here's what happens in those quiet moments when they're alone. Regret starts seeping in. Not the kind of regret that makes them reach out. Their ego is still too strong for that. But the kind that makes them replay conversations, makes them wonder what would have happened if they'd handled things differently, makes them think about the version of you that cared, that showed up, that made them feel seen, and realize that version is gone. They try to distract themselves. They hang out with other people. They stay busy. They tell themselves they made the right choice. But silence has a way of finding them. In the middle of the night, in a quiet moment, when something reminds them of you. And in those moments, they feel what they'll never say. They miss you. But here's the thing that most people don't realize, and this is critical. While they're wrestling with their ego, trying to justify why they haven't reached out, trying to convince themselves they don't care, something completely different is happening to you. And that transformation, that's what actually matters. Not their regret. Not their realization. What's happening to you while you're silent? This is where everything shifts. Because while they're dealing with regret and ego and all that internal noise, you're doing something else entirely. You're healing. You're rebuilding. You're becoming someone different. Silence isn't just about creating distance from them. It's about creating space for yourself. Space to remember who you were before you started shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's idea of what you should be. Space to realize that chasing someone who didn't see your value was never about them. It was about you not seeing it either. Here's what happens in that quiet space. You start to understand something powerful. Your silence isn't a punishment you're inflicting on them. It's a boundary you're enforcing for yourself. It's you saying, I'm not available to people who treat my presence as optional. And that distinction, that's everything. Most men never reach this point. They use silence as a weapon. They go quiet, hoping it'll make someone miss them, hoping it'll make someone regret losing them, hoping it'll make someone come back. And because their silence is still dependent on the other person's response, they never actually let go. They're still mentally tied to someone who's already gone. But when you truly embrace silence, when you stop doing it for a reaction and start doing it for your peace, you transform. You stop checking if they're watching your stories. You stop wondering if they're thinking about you. You stop crafting perfect responses in your head for if they ever reach out. You just exist in your own space, building your own life. And that shift, from needing them to see you to no longer caring if they do, that's when you become untouchable. This is the real power of silence. Not what it does to them, what it does to you. It teaches you that you can walk away from people who don't value you, that your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. That being alone in peace is better than being with someone who makes you feel alone. And when you reach that place, when your silence is no longer strategic but simply who you've become, that's when the dynamic completely changes. Because now, whether they come back or not doesn't matter. You've already won. Stay with this. Because what comes next reveals the test that shows if you've truly transformed. Here's the test. They reach out. Maybe it's a casual text. Hey, how have you been? Maybe it's a comment on your post. Maybe it's a message at 1 a.m. But they reach out, and in that moment, Everything you've built during your silence gets tested. Because here's what's happening. Their ego has finally cracked enough for them to make a move. Not fully collapsed. They're still testing the waters. Still protecting themselves. But there's a crack. They're reaching out not because they've had some profound realization, but because your silence has created enough discomfort that they need to know where they stand. And this is where most men fail the test. They see that message, and they respond immediately. They're friendly, available, eager to reconnect. And in doing that, they teach the other person the same lesson again. Your absence was temporary. Your boundaries were negotiable. You'll always come back. But if you've truly transformed during that silence, if you've genuinely let go and found peace in your own space, your response, or lack of response, will reflect that. You're not rushing to reply. You're not crafting the perfect message. You're simply unbothered. Because whether they're back or not doesn't validate you. Your peace isn't dependent on their presence. Here's what people don't understand about ego collapse. It doesn't happen dramatically. There's no big moment where they fall to their knees and apologize. It happens slowly, quietly, in the realization that they can't recreate what they had with you, that your silence wasn't a game you were playing. It was genuinely you moving on. And that realization, that they lost access to something real, that's the collapse. They become the ones checking, the ones wondering, the ones feeling small in your presence or in your absence. The power dynamic has permanently shifted. And whether they're back in your life or not is irrelevant, because you've already reached a place where their validation means nothing. Whether they return or not, you've already reached the final state. Let me show you what that looks like. You've invested 17 minutes into this, and here's where everything clicks into place. I'm going to tell you something that might challenge everything you came here looking for. The truth is this. The real power was never about making them miss you. It was never about getting them to realize what they lost. It was never about their ego collapsing or them coming back with regret. The real power is that you've evolved past needing any of that to feel whole. You don't need their regret to validate your worth. You don't need them to come back to prove you were valuable. Their ego collapse isn't your victory, it's their consequence. Your victory is that you're free. Free from needing external validation. Free from measuring your worth by someone else's inability to see it. Free from trying to prove yourself to people who were never going to appreciate you. Your silence transformed you into someone who doesn't need to be seen by them to know you matter. Someone so grounded in their own peace that whether they miss you is completely irrelevant to your happiness. That's untouchable. Not because you're cold or bitter, but because you're finally free, and that freedom is the ultimate power. So yes, their ego will collapse. Yes, they'll miss you. Yes, they'll realize what they lost. But by the time they do, you'll be so far past needing that validation that their return won't even register as a win. Because you've already won. The moment you chose peace over proving yourself, you won. This is why strategic silence is the ultimate form of self-mastery. Because it's not about them at all. It never was. It was always about you becoming the kind of person who doesn't need someone else to complete them. So here's what I want to know. Have you experienced this process? Are you on the side of strategic silence right now, watching someone's ego slowly crack? Or have you been on the other side, realizing too late that you lost someone who genuinely cared? Drop a comment and tell me your story. Where are you in this journey? Because here's the thing. I read every single comment, and I respond personally. Your experience matters. And more importantly, your story might be exactly what someone else in this community needs to hear right now. This isn't just about relationships or dating dynamics. This is about building a community of people who understand that silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That walking away from people who don't value you isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself. That becoming untouchable doesn't mean being cold. It means being so grounded in your peace that external validation becomes irrelevant. If that resonates with you, if you see yourself in this journey, then you're part of something bigger. We're not bitter. We're not broken. We're not playing games. We're just men who've learned that the strongest position you can take is complete internal peace. And that peace, that's what makes you untouchable. Your silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom. You're not the one chasing anymore. You're the calm, grounded person who doesn't need external validation to know your worth. And that's how you become untouchable. Thanks for being here. Drop that comment. Let me know where you are in this process. And I'll see you in the next one.